When we think specifically about guided reading groups, we need to make sure that we remember that the number one goal is to create more confident readers. The goal is not to put a grade in a grade book, it's not to meet a standard, it's not to mark something off on a to do list for our school year. But what we really are trying to do is create kids who are readers and then give them the skills and strategies to be confident in their reading ability. That's why we level these groups and we put them with readers of similar ability so that then they can work together with kids at a similar pace and then be challenged to move farther and farther into their own reading skill. And we give them more challenging books when it's appropriate, and we teach them specific skills when we know that they need them. So please remember that the goal is to create more confident readers. I'm going to talk briefly about what an actual guided reading group looks like. So, most classrooms have what we call a kidney shaped reading table or a small table somewhere in their room where teachers will call back small groups of children. We usually want those groups to stay in about 4 or 5. Sometimes they might get into 6 or 7, depending on how many kids we have total in our class. But we know that when it gets to be too many, it gets to be a little more difficult to manage. The whole point of the small group is so that when kids sit with me around my reading table, that they're within an arm's reach, so that I can actually reach out and touch them or touch the book that they're looking at so that I can help them focus on their reading instruction and it feels a little more one-on-one. So when my group gets too big that I can't do that and fit everyone around my table, I probably need to look at my schedule and figure out how to get more groups into my day. Groups ideally would last anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. And I know that that's very difficult to do. I've been in situations where my groups, I was lucky if I had 10 to 15 minutes with my group. But if you can make it work, a group of 20 to 30 minutes is great. Groups need to be meeting daily. Now, let me talk briefly about this. If I have my class in small groups and I'm by myself, more than likely, I'm not going to be able to read with every group every single day. This is where your school district may provide extra help. So maybe you have a title reading teacher or an aide or someone who can come into your room. And if that's possible, structure that in an effective way around reading group time. Maybe even make it so that it's almost like your team teaching. Let him take a small group and you take a small group at the same time. And now what we've done is we have less kids working independently at their seats. We have 2 teachers working with kids, and then we can rotate the kids through much quicker. If you are lucky and you get to be in a situation like that, I think you'll find that you will be able to meet with every kid every day. But if not, and you're all by yourself doing it, then I totally understand. You have to give yourself a little bit of freedom. And so, what I encourage you is please try to meet with every kid and hear them read at least every other day. It would not be uncommon to have groups that meet with you on Monday and Wednesday, and then groups that meet with you on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then maybe you meet with different groups or individual readers on Fridays for assessment time. That would be a very reasonable structure. But just look at your schedule and see where can I really focus in my time and trim it down so that I can have effective guided reading groups. If I have to meet for a short amount of time, but it means I get to meet with every kid every day, then maybe that's a better setup for you. Or if you feel like you really want to think about those 5 strategies, then maybe you extend your reading group time and then you meet with them every other day. So you have to think about what works best for you and the structure of your class. Also, what happens in a guided reading group is that the teacher is selecting a book that the group can read because those kids are all reading on a similar reading level, and we want them reading with 90 to 94% accuracy. And that's determined by doing running records or DRA reading samples or some sort of assessment where you know what their reading level is on. So you have these kids that are on similar reading level coming back and meeting with you and then reading text that's all on about their same level. There's different times we want kids to be challenged on what they're reading, and then other times we want it to be very high accuracy, this 90 to 94%, because we want to practice fluent reading and those skills and strategies that we've been teaching kids so that they learn not only what to do when they run into words they don't know, but they're also learning what it means to sound like a good reader and really practice that fluent reading. Now, when you are in a guided reading group as a teacher, I want you to remember that the children should be doing most, if not all, of the reading. This is not the time for you to run a mini lesson. This is not the time for you to necessarily always be modeling what they need to be doing. This is their practice time. This is the time that if no one else is reading to them independently at home, that you can hear them practice with you during the school day. The teacher is there to support those readers and teach them strategies and know when you get involved to help them figure out something that they are practicing. Just keep in mind that those groups are meant for reading practice. Sometimes teachers will dominate the conversation and the instructional time when really it should be all about those kids reading and reading for the teacher. As the instructor, you should be observing. You should have your total focus on your group at that time. You should be taking notes about what's happening in the group, what's happening with individual kids, so that you can determine where that group needs to go next. Does the whole group need to learn about a certain skill? Maybe two of these readers in this group are just taking off and doing awesome, and you need to move them up into another group. Maybe you need to move someone down. Maybe it's the group has gotten so big with all the shifting and the fluidity of the groups, it's time to split this group into two. But what I want you to think about is that kids are not stuck in their guided reading group. It's always fluid. They can move up, they can move down, they can stay the same. It's fine. We're not labeling our reading groups as good readers, poor readers, struggling readers, average readers. They're just groups. They're just small groups that you're meeting with. And so if you keep that in mind, that you're just letting them practice with kids on similar level, there's going to be ability to move them up and down. And believe me, I know, I've been a classroom teacher. I know that it's easy to just let things be. Everybody's in a group and they're happy and this is what's working. But really challenge yourself as the teacher to say, am I meeting every individual kid with what they need? And if not, I need to be thinking about, okay, it's time to move them into a different group. And then do that. Don't be afraid to do that. I briefly said that sometimes the teacher will spend Fridays to do assessment. I think that's a good strategy. But this concept of knowing how to take a running record, it's quick and easy assessment. And if you don't know how to do that, please seek out someone who can teach you how to take a running record, or maybe you'll learn it in another professional development session. But running records are key to understanding the level at which your students are reading with accuracy. And so once you become comfortable with taking a running record, you can easily have one or two students read it out loud to you at the end of a small group time or off to the side quickly, and you'll be able to know how accurately and effectively they're reading the leveled text that you picked out for him or her. So we already talked a little bit about how kids can move from one group to another and it should be fluid. And then again, I'm emphasizing that every kid needs to be read to. They need to be able to read out loud to someone every day. And so if that person can't be you, I want you to think about who can help you with this. Do you have a college practicum student coming into your classroom to get hours? Do you have a parent volunteer? Do you have someone who floats around the school? Just if you ever have those people coming in wanting to volunteer and help in your room and you're never quite sure what to do with them, I encourage you, don't send that person to make copies. Instead, let them sit and read with kids. Let kids read out loud to anyone that you can get in front of them so that they are reading out loud to someone every day. Remember, guided reading is about practicing our reading so that we can become better. And so as we wrap up, I just want you to think about that when you're in those reading groups, I want you to run your classroom in a way that your students know that you cannot be interrupted when you are with a reading group. that time is precious and that time is short. And so, in order to run it effectively, kids have to know that those working independently at their seats cannot interrupt you, cannot ask questions that can't wait till later. And they need to also be taught skills and strategies for what it means to work independently at their seats. So maybe you set up systems where if they have a question, they go ask someone else what to do. If they have to go to the bathroom, there's a procedure for that when you're in reading groups. You just need to think about, like, what are my non negotiables for my group time? So, if someone's not bleeding and someone's not sick and throwing up, then they probably shouldn't be bothering you in that time. You'll have to figure out what works for you. I will share one strategy that I have seen is a post-it note system, where if a kid has a question at their seat while they're independently working and you are with a reading group, they can write their question on a post-it note, slide back to the teacher, just place that post-it note in front of you at the reading table, and then they walk away. And so, as the teacher, you can glance down quickly and see, like, okay, is this something I have to address right away? Is this an emergency or not? Or can it wait until I'm transitioning between groups to answer it? But then the other thing is that you teach kids that once they write their question, they got to move on. And so that keeps, hopefully, kids from just sitting there with their hand up in the air the entire 20 minutes that you're working with a small group and they do nothing while you sit there. So I know that guided reading groups requires a lot of work on your part as the teacher. It requires preparation and procedures for your group, as well as what you do with the other kids in your classroom. But that one on one time reading and then really hearing kids read, and so that you understand where they are at with their reading ability, will really, really pay off for you in your reading instruction, because you will really understand your students, know what they should be reading, and what skills they need to learn next.